All right. It looks like we are recording and we're live on YouTube. So we will begin this Planning Commission meeting and we'll get started with the chair determination letter. In accordance with Utah Code Section 52-4-207, subsection 4 of the Utah Open and Public Meeting Act, I have determined that conducting an electronic meeting of the Centerville Planning Commission with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based on the facts and circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, we will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everybody. Moving right along, I've asked Commissioner Heyman to offer a prayer or thought tonight, so we'll turn some time over to her.
Thanks, Kevin. So I was appointed to be on the Planning Commission almost 6 years ago. Well, 6 this May. I was thinking that this may be the last time that I'm asked to give a thought as a planning commissioner. And I've been thinking back, and it's incredible what happens in 6 years. 6 years ago, I had 2 children who were in elementary school. I had a 4th grader and a 6th grader. And my oldest, my former 6th grader, is graduating from Fremont this year, which is a little mind-blowing as a parent to think about it. So I was thinking back to the first time that I was asked to give a thought. And I quoted a very wise man, I think. I quoted Jimi Hendrix. So in the honor of my first thought, I would like to potentially end, maybe there is going to be one more that I squeeze in, but if not, I would like to make sure that I end with the wise words of Jimi Hendrix. And I think that they're wise for many reasons, but these words apply equally to the Planning Commission and what we do here. And the quote is this: "Knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens." That's it. That's my quote. That's all I got, guys.
That's great. No, that's perfect, Shaylin. That's good. All right, let's move along. We're at a good pace. We may be done by the time you need to leave, Shaylin, so that'd be good. Just kidding. Our first item on the agenda is an administrative decision with the Hive development at 555 North, 400 West. A couple of things, or 3 things that we're looking for here. So let's turn the time over to staff and we'll hear what Corey has to say.
Okay, hopefully Chair Daly, you can hear my audio. Good. As indicated, your business item tonight is administrative decisions. This is regarding the Hive development. You're looking at simply now a public meeting to conduct the final decisions that are being requested of you at the meeting. 3 of them, as you indicated. It involves 2 site plans, one that has commercial and the other one that has residential uses. As you're aware, the entire property was part of a previous PDO or Plan Development Overlay approval.
Corey, may I interrupt you?
Yeah, sure.
We have a commissioner who needs to recuse themselves.
You're right. That was my fault. I forgot that part. So we'll turn to Commissioner Shagrud. You would like to recuse yourself. Sorry about that.
I would. This project is adjacent to my home, and I'm a very opinionated person. So I think it would be best if I recused myself. And so I'll do that now, and I'll turn off my video.
Perfect. Sorry about that. I meant to bring that up beforehand. Okay, Corey, go ahead.
Okay, we'll continue on. I think I left off that you have a couple of site plans to approve involving commercial and residential. Also, a third element is looking at the subdivision. This would be a planned development subdivision in order to not only divide off the commercial lot to make the commercial zoning effective, but also divide up the individual units of the townhomes and the single family being proposed so that they may be offered for sale. I'm going to bring up just some exhibits. Hopefully you see the generalized civil plan that shows the entire development. I don't plan on pouring through the detail for the report. I think it's pretty extensive and you can certainly ask questions. Just highlight some matters. Worked extensively with the project manager, Jeff Allen of CW Land this week to prepare the exhibits, and there were a lot of them. So I think I'll just use those by default as you may have questions. But a couple of highlights, just a reminder that we're dividing the land so that the commercial on the west side or the left side of your screen can be separated from the residential piece of the property. I bring up the subdivision matters in there. They're really final plat matters, recording documents, refining the lot line associated with the commercial lot, and then the final improvement, the construction drawings for the subdivision would need to be approved by the city engineer. And on a subdivision, you're recommending a final approval to the city council. So I'm simply defaulting some conditions of approval if it's your wish to approve the subdivision plat that be wrapped up for the city council. As to the site plans, I'll address the commercial. As you look at some of the tables of the report, there are a few elements that did not receive final calculations. I had electronic copy on the end, so hand calculating the interior parking lot landscaping. I think it'll likely meet the percentage requirements, but we just need some verification. A few elements associated with the trash receptacle, they're supposed to match the building, and you'll see some tie-ups onto that. One thing I kind of failed to do, well, actually two things I failed to do. On the landscaping plan, it was pointed out to me that on the conceptual plan, you see the private road on the north side or the top of the site plan. That's that roadway and that landscaping is part of the separation between the residential to the north. We put the road there to push the building, and it's parking further to the south. So it would keep the building further away than the standard 30-foot setback that a PDO or that zone would require. But we're missing the trees. I did contact Mr. Allen and mentioned that's something I've missed in the report. The trees along that fence line in the commercial lot were not shown on the landscaping plan. So we ought to make sure that we tie that up. Again, I think it was the internal landscaping. The other elements that shared in the landscaping we can talk about if you want, but they are involved in the amenity and monumentation. There's an overall amenity and monumentation. If you look at what they've submitted, they have not achieved an exact final design of those elements for the project. They did provide some illustrations of what they're committing to in the final site plan. So the question before the commission is, are you okay with the identified elements that will be required? If you are, I put in a condition to allow the zoning administrator to finalize the construction details for the project as they seek permits. If you are not comfortable with, and the mitigation was as if somehow me and the applicant disagrees, it would return to you for resolution. If you're not comfortable with that, that's something that I think you should discuss on what would be your expectations with the applicant so that they have a clear understanding of what you would consider for final approval. I think the last item that I want to address in summary to you, really involves the residential portion of it. If you look at the exhibits provided to you for the single family uses, and I think you should give a little bit time for the applicant to pitch their reasoning for some alterations. As you look at the PDO sheets that were approved with the project, they're altering the material colorations and the pitch and shapes of the residential units. Their argument during that time was it was conceptual. They had not finalized the design of the residential units. So they did provide some conceptual plans because if you recall, the RH zone did not allow single family development. It takes the PDO to enact an opportunity to have the single family in the project. And so those were preliminary conceptual plans seeking if the city would entertain the single family. Since then, they've kept in their argument that the material expectations of the RH zone are still maintained, but they'd like to change the design of the materials and the shapes of the single family dwelling to match what they feel is more closely related to the office style, the modern architecture, along with the townhome style. So I put into the staff report, this may or may not comply with the PDO. I think that's something that the Planning Commission should weigh in on. The argument that would be the may not is as we rezone properties and hold the public hearings and host them, a lot of people are looking at the further details of a PDO because we actually require a little bit more detail in the conceptual review because this is a custom zone. And so the argument of may not is how tight and strict do we rely on those exhibits? Is it a exactness standard of those exhibits? And the other argument for the may comply is that they were approved for the single family. They're maintaining the consistency of the materials expectations of the RH zone. That would be in essence an argument that they're conforming to the conceptual plan. And so if you look back at the original PDO language, it was basically couching the conceptual design of the architecture as concepts. So it did not couch it that these were final designs. And that the question now becomes, and I try to lay out the policy to show you what the RH standards were, what the site plan expectations are for a final, what the PDO exhibits indicated. And I think the finding of the commission is whether they stayed within substantially in conformance with the intent of the PDO approval. Part of me makes a conservative call because we did see some original exhibits and generally they had a little bit different appeal to them. And so I stay conservative to honor that appeal. But at the same time, they were conceptual. We passed them as conceptual. I look back on the arguments about the single family. There was a betterment to allow single family. If it weren't for the PDO, these would be townhomes. And so, they are still staying in argument with the single family. If I recall correctly, there were concerns about the single family encroaching too close to the north property line, and they committed to a 20-foot setback, which is the similar setback of the RL zone to the north. I also recall that there was discussions during the PDO about decks, the second story balconies. They committed during that time to eliminate those as balconies. And so I think it's one of those I'm going to leave to the commission. In some sense, they've substantially complied with the conceptual approval. but it will have a little bit of a different look and appeal with the single family units compared to the exhibits. My take on a design take, whether you like modern architecture or not, the single family design being proposed is probably more closely related to the thematic of the project than even the original single family exhibits. And so I'm just going to make it a little bit easy on myself and punt to 6-7 members of the Planning Commission to make that administrative call, because we are in administrative decision. And so you just have to make the findings. Do they conform to what was envisioned for the project? So with that, I think there might be some, in my opinion, I was writing this report at 3:30 and posting it by 5. And so there are some details about call outs of the trees, the landscaping, the 7% calculations. We probably, if you're inclined to move any forward with any approval at this point, we probably should tighten up a few conditions of approval just for clarity. But with that, I'll turn it back to Chair Daly and the commission to ask me questions or move on forward with discussion.
Great, thanks, Corey. Yeah, you've covered everything pretty well. I don't have any other questions, so let's open it up to the rest of the commissioners. Does anybody else have any questions for Corey?
Corey, I just probably have a couple questions. When I look really closely at the site plan, and we've had a discussion about the sidewalk along the frontage road, it looks like the property line or the parcel line intersects diagonally over a long distance through the existing sidewalk, and the sidewalk edge does not match the current property line. Is that correct? And if so, how do we handle that moving forward?
That you are down to, the devil is in the details. I don't have a good enough answer to you. The city engineer is looking at the plans. He has not called out a change to the typical park strip and sidewalk, but I tried to cover that a little bit under the subdivision, that the construction drawings need to be reviewed by the city engineer, and any adjustments would have to comply with the standards. So I'm kind of defaulting to the city engineer to determine what needs to be done there.
Okay. And then the other items that you've highlighted in the staff report related to the landscape plan, the trees, utility screening, trash enclosures, et cetera. Do you recommend that if we move towards an approval, that be part of the motions of approval, or I couldn't quite tell the differences between motions 1, 2, and 3. In my cursory review. So I just wanted to make sure I understood the differences between each of your motions that you've suggested.
Yeah, good point. They do mimic each other quite a bit. And again, it was back to that overall concept that this is one master project. We have to make certain call outs for the commercial architecture versus the residential architecture. But I did mimic a lot of the same language simply to be consistent through each approval, because we are relying on the ultimate infrastructure bond for the entire project, as well as the city engineer looking at the construction plans, not only for the commercial, but for the residential. But I think what I didn't have time to do is fix those idiosyncrasy places, because I had given a long laundry list to the developer. They fixed a lot of things in a short amount of time, but I didn't give individual call outs on things that probably ought to be tightened up, like install the required trees. So if you are leaning, maybe I can help button up a couple of conditions that call out returning to comply with those expectations.
Sir, I don't mean to interrupt you, but Chair, I had a personal scheduling conflict, so may I be excused?
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask you actually if you wanted to share your thoughts before you left, but if you need to go, you can go.
let me give you my very brief thoughts. I wanted to ask Corey if I had time before I had to leave to look back to see what the conceptual plan was that was proposed for these single family residences, because this, I didn't get a chance to go back and look at the prior version, but this seems very different to me. And in one of the call outs that I'm looking at, this one is on page 45 for me in the large PDF, but it seems like there's an awful lot of black on these. And I'm not necessarily opposed to the more modern architecture, but there is quite a bit of black on this, which just feels a little jarring and out of place. That was sort of my two thoughts.
Yeah, I think the original one, and it's in the packet, is it says craftsman style option. And so that's what was kind of shown to us, was more of a craftsman style home.
Page
Okay.
34, Shaylin.
34. Okay, that was,
34.
thank you. I missed that as I was looking through it. I like I said, I don't necessarily oppose the idea of the more modern architecture, because I recognize, particularly looking at the commercial building and the multifamily housing, the original proposal, it does feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So I don't necessarily oppose going a little bit more modern. It just felt like a lot of black as I was looking through it. So I appreciate you accommodating my scheduling conflict, and I apologize for
Corey,
the
would it be okay if we address that prior to Commissioner leaving?
Corey's muted, but
We'll allow Chair Daly to make that call.
yeah, let's do that really quickly before Shaylin has to go. She's already late, but yes, go ahead, Darlene.
Sorry, thank you. Hey, my only comment is the colors are actually determined by the buyer. We offer 10 different color schemes that range from white, blue, gray. And so the as we move forward to avoid any future miscommunication, there are actually nuances in the color schemes based on what the buyer chooses. And we do have 10 different options for them to choose from. And so I think there will be a much bigger variety. And so I just wanted to give that disclaimer.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. So thank you very much, Kevin. If my personal issue doesn't go as long as I think it might, I'll try to come pop back online. So thank you, everyone.
Well, sounds good. All right. Let's see. Does anybody else, or any other commissioners, have any more questions for Corey?
Corey, I
Becky.
would see if there's a way you can, I mean, there are some slight differences, but sometimes I have a hard time seeing from like the initial to what we just approved, then what we're here now, and trying to keep track of everything. Is there anything beyond what you were saying with the trees that's a big kind of adjustment, and some of the things that what Shaylin just talked about, that's a big adjustment from what we saw last time?
I don't perceive through all the tables. I think I tried to label things that were in yellow that might be issue, and I think most of the comments is likely feasible in the layout and form that they've already proposed. We're just refining whether they met the technical merit of the calculation. What I did miss that is semi-substantial is the trees along the commercial lot.
Okay.
I did miss that in my review.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Anybody else? No? Okay. So let's turn the time over to the applicant again, I guess. Darlene, if you'd like to address some of the items that Corey has brought up, or anything else that you'd like to talk about from this report.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Good to see everybody again. My husband, his running joke for the week is, what are we going to do for the 1-year anniversary of 2 weeks to flatten the curve? So I'm just going to lay that out there as my icebreaker for the day. But I do have Jeff Allen with me today. He has been he's been fully integrated into this project since we last spoke. I do feel like if it's okay, it'd be a bit appropriate for me to just tell you what's happened in the last 4 months since we've met. If you've seen Jeff, you've probably seen him every day with his boots on in the trailer park. He was on the front lines assisting with the residents through the transition out. We were successful in not only transitioning the residents, I believe every single resident to a new home, but in partnering with multiple different organizations, dispersing quite a bit of charity funds, and really ultimately helping every single individual through that process. We do recognize that we actually put that as our priority over getting this final plat approved, which is why we actually haven't been back. It was a full-time effort through multiple of our staff members, and that was the most important thing to us. That being said, we haven't gotten to this point or been able to obtain a demo permit yet. Spoken to the mayor and staff, have whole understanding of what needs to happen there in order to successfully have a demo permit, so we can make sure we're doing that with asbestos, et cetera. The appropriate remediation, but we are able to clean the park, and we have somebody that we're paying every day to clean the park to ensure we minimize any health and safety hazards. Our goal, since we are the current landowner, is to obtain that demo permit in the next 10 days. And then we'll be able to clean up what could potentially be a multiple hazards for Centerville City. So again, that's been our #1 focus, or else we probably would have been back here before the holidays. In the meantime, Corey has been very helpful in working with Jeff and I and a variety of our consultants on making our plan substantially similar to where we were at the preliminary set. We can get into the details of that. We do have the exact calculations on the landscaping. More than happy to commit to the trees, can talk in more details about the sidewalk and trash receptacle. I do think that Corey was very thorough about his narrative on the single family homes. I'm sure you guys remember when we were going in for the single family homes, it wasn't as if that was a guarantee. And so we do feel like we gave some conceptual plans. Those plans were based on meeting the zone requirements in terms of materiality. And so we, as to confirm what Corey mentioned, we do feel that we're still in compliance with that, because our exterior materiality, which is subject again to color change, is the same. We do feel like that was our understanding of what the approval was. There are 18 lots. We only showed one photo without a floor plan. So we weren't taking the stance that the Planning Commission would expect that floor plan to be replicated 18 times in that fashion. So that's where we're at today. We are excited to move forward, and quite honestly eager to do so as well, because due to the nature of the project, we did put so many of moving forward on hold to try and help the residents transition out of the park. So I think I'd rather just answer any questions that you have, because I think that's where the real conversation comes up. But before we circle back to the single family, I would like Jeff to address a couple of those technical items, because we do have the answers on those right now.
Appreciate everyone's time this evening. To start off, the internal landscape islands in the parking lot is just under 8%, and the requirement 7%. On page 21 of the package that Corey provided you, you'll see the landscaping of the commercial parcel. It's hard to see, but where the dark hashed line is, you'll be able to see that is where the sidewalk and park strip are, and it matches the existing properties to the north and to the south. And it's covered up with a black line in some of the site plans. So I just wanted to point that out, that we do show the sidewalk and park strip as previously mentioned.
Let's see. Oh, the trash receptacle.
Yes, and then if we shift down past the renderings of the office building on page 31, we have details of the trash receptacles that we'll be using for the project. If there's any additional questions that any commissioner has, I'd be happy to answer them with Darlene.
Yeah, so any concerns with the trees, to be able to work those trees into the areas that Corey identified?
No, we could go back to that page, I believe it was 21. We'll need to plant, I believe the code is 1 tree for every 20 feet along
I think it was 12, he said.
Okay.
12?
We have 12 trees on the western property line, and then we'll have to add those trees per code. I don't see an issue. That's a 7-foot buffer, which is plenty of space to plant trees, and we'll just make sure that we plant them per code. And
Most likely what we would recommend when we update our landscaping plan is the same tree that would be appropriate in a park strip, which is really actually smaller than that area, would be the tree that we would plant, just to make sure there's no overgrowth. I'm sure you guys see that we are going to be installing a new fence along that line. And so we want to make sure there's no issues there. You know, one of the comments from the actual residents from the beginning that are adjacent to the property is they have some great looking trees on their side of their property that they want to make sure aren't going to have an issue if they're encroaching so on our side. So I think it would be appropriate for us to make sure we plant a tree that, while it can provide privacy, isn't going to have an issue with future encroachment.
Thanks for that. Another quick question for you then. So I think in the original, part of the confusion, I guess, was in the original PDO approval that we reviewed many months ago, it identified that craftsman style home as an option. Is that going to remain an option, or is it just going to be, I guess part 2 of the question is, there are conceptual renderings 1, 2, and 3. Are those the 3 options that will be available, or maybe you could speak to what we expect to see there?
Yeah, our proposal is that they would be those exact exteriors. I would probably focus on the black and white version of it, because one of the things that's very similar is they're actually 3-sided in hardy board, which is, you know, a fiber cement product, which is generally known with a craftsman architecture. So if somebody were to pick a different color option, you know, if somebody were to pick a white, for instance, or a light gray with the stone, they would potentially read more craftsman, which would be an option, because that the actual material base of the home is the same. So yeah. And even on the home that has kind of the pitch roof, that particular product in the middle, it's actually a lap siding as well. So it potentially looks like a wood. It's actually lap siding again. So if that were a different color palette, again, it could read in more of a craftsman way. Our goal is to eliminate the confusion and move forward with these exact 3 elevations, knowing that there is a color variance. It was important to us to develop additional plans because we were trying to meet different demographics. So we have 3 different varying square footages on the homes. as well as like one of the floor plan has a master on the main element. We feel like this is a great opportunity for somebody who wants a maintenance-free lifestyle, loves living in the neighborhood. So not only would the floor plans be, we would commit to these exterior concepts, but the exteriors, but we would also commit to the guts of the home as well. And then the buyers can personalize them from here.
Okay, so in a nutshell, we've got 3 floor plans with 10 different color options. So there's plenty of variety. Have you seen in other developments you've done a wide variety of choices, or do people tend to pick, you know, their favorite, or and it's all the same, or not the same, but maybe very similar?
Yeah, we're selling a community right now in Kaysville that we've sold a variety of homes in the last 30 days. As you can imagine, white and light gray are the very most popular, which is great. We have a really pretty green option that's been popular. And then we do actually have a smoky gray option that has been popular with some people. It's kind of like the new modern craftsman look that you're seeing a lot of. We do have a rule that we don't allow the same color or elevation on either side of a property. And so we don't replicate the same home twice in a row.
Okay, good to know. Thanks. Does anybody else have any questions for Darlene? Or
I do. Are you letting the market decide which products are being sold, or do you have a minimum amount, like with the master on the main? Are you able to guarantee like there will be at least one, or are you just saying it's an option and people can just choose?
You know, that's a good question, because the townhomes are built on speculation. We go ahead and build them either way. Traditionally in the past with a single family home, we actually have done a variety of spec homes and pre-sales. So right now our current strategy is to do that. In the effort of full disclosure, because of the extreme rise in lumber and building costs, many of the large builders, even including Ivory Homes as of last week, has stopped building pre-sale homes. And they have started to pick the floor plans in advance, so they sell them later to better control the cost. So, I mean, from our standpoint, we like to listen to the market, but we have listened to it in the past, and that's what our architecture is based off of. That's why we offered the 3 plans. So if we were to build it as a speculative build, my sense is that we would do a little bit of each plan, because we feel like there's a unique niche for every plan.
Thank you.
all right. Anybody else have any questions for the applicant? No? Sounds good. Well, thank you, Darlene and Jeff, for your input and responses. Very helpful. So we'll go ahead and invite you to mute your video, and we will go back to a discussion with the among the commissioners. Anybody else have any further questions for Corey, or are we ready to talk about this stuff on our own? Spencer.
I just got a question for Corey, and maybe it helps us as a commission. You know, as I look at the different options that are available, obviously it's a big shift to a modern architecture look. If I was sitting in one of our meetings previously and that had been brought up at the conceptual standpoint, I would have liked them then, and I like them now. I don't know that I care too much either way. So from Corey's concern, hey, do we be conservative and say, well, that wasn't represented or isn't representative of a conceptual plan? I'm not sure. I'm torn on it. Do you give members of the public input? And really, when it comes down to it, how much, you know, say do they have based off of certain PUD requirements? You know, we always want to hear from the community and understand their concerns. But for me personally, I guess I don't mind it. The question I have for Corey would be the color schemes. And I plead ignorance a bit here, but how far does our entry corridor on Parish Lane, these color schemes go north and south? For example, we gave the bank, a pretty hard time on their color schemes. How much farther north do those color schemes extend, and therefore do we need to limit the available color choices in the PUD to be more of those lighter colors as opposed to a very dark color? That's a question for Corey.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is the Parish Lane Design Guidelines.
Yes, thank you.
And the Parish Lane Design Guidelines have basically 3 parameters. One of them is very subjective. The first parameter is a project itself, independent, isolated, fronting Parish Lane, would be subject to those coloration standards that you're familiar with. A project that may be multiple lots but developed as one whole. So think of the Walmart Chili's kind of site, where yes, Walmart is a fair distance, but it's a part of a larger project that fronts on Parish Lane. So they are subject to those standards. The one that was debated just for fun is the Quick Quack. I have to do the little rolling roller coaster because every time the attorney mentioned Quick Quack, he would do this in the meeting. Quick Quack did not have frontage on Parish Lane, and in some sense wasn't a part of a greater development. But that third item, that subjective item, says has a substantial presence on Parish Lane. And that's how Quick Quack, the commission made the decision was, yeah, you're not fronting it, you're not part of a project that's fronting it, but you have a presence on Parish Lane, so you're a part of this area. When you look at this project, it sits behind the MTC buildings, it sits behind the Performing Arts Center. It's, in my opinion, the line, it ends at that point with those projects. And so this is now independent and subject to our RH, RM architectural standards by a base zone, and then whatever you conclude compliance with the plan development overlay approval.
Perfect. Thanks, Corey. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything since a portion of it is commercial high. So thank you.
Great, that's a good question. Thanks, Becky.
Yeah, and maybe how do you guys feel about the verbiage of the fence matching the existing fence? That's the one to the south of the existing neighborhood. Do you think that's specific enough?
You're talking about the fence between this development and like the Chick-fil-A and the Performing Arts Center and the MTC?
I think what it's saying is the fence to between the existing residences to the north and this.
Oh, I see what you're saying. On page 7, it's numbered at the bottom of the page 7 of the staff report.
Right. So I just lost that. Will you read that?
Yeah, well, it says during the PDO approval, there was a discussion regarding perimeter fencing. Along the south side of the development, there is an existing privacy fence. The final site plan indicates that similar style fence will be used along the north boundary of the development.
So the south fence is, maybe this is a good question. And maybe I should have asked this to the applicant. Is it possible to ask to the applicant? Is that, or Corey, maybe you know, that south fence is like 8 feet tall.
Yes, the south fence is 8 feet tall on that south perimeter of vinyl. It does drop down in one spot to the 4 foot as it fronts out to the street on 400 West, I believe. The north fence, the code would require a minimum 6 foot fence, but the commission is allowed to approve up to a 10 foot fence. And so the question that I would have is if we go is 6 foot sufficient for the expectations of the code? Or will you allow the applicant, because it is at a permissive level of the applicant by ordinance, to go to an 8-foot fence to create that privacy? The only caution that I would make is that that 8-foot fence is 2 feet higher for anybody's backyard. If they are trying to grow a garden or anything, it becomes a significant shade barrier. So 6 foot would be the minimum code with the trees. And I'm speaking out with a forked tongue. Trees provide shade, and they're one every 20 feet, but they're at least not a solid fence running the entire property line.
I remember hearing from residents both, what you just said, they don't want to have shade ruining their growings, and B, they'd like to have extra privacy. So I'm sort of torn as to not really knowing what's going to happen with that fence, and remembering that residents did bring that up in a couple different scenarios. So I guess that I feel like that might be sort of an issue that maybe we need to know a little bit more information about.
And I think you should ask the applicant, because one of the applicant's arguments during that debate is there are some existing fences, and some of them may be good and in good shape, and then there are others that may not be in great shape. And so it became a little bit of how do I be sensitive to do I just put up a fence automatically along everybody's good and bad fences? Do we take down some bad fences and put some up that looks nice for them? So I think you should probably ask the applicant of what they think is their intention as you debate it.
Thanks, Corey. Would that be okay if we ask the applicant?
sure.
Yeah. Does anybody have any objections to that? No. Okay. Darlene, would you like to address that?
I
Or
may
Jeff?
step on Darlene's toes and take this one. Our intent was to install a 6-foot tan vinyl fence matching the fence on the southern property line. We have been coordinating with neighbors. Most neighbors are wanting to match our fence on their side yards, and they're just waiting for us to install the fence. So I think everyone that we've spoken with thus far is expecting a 6-foot vinyl fence, but we appreciate any feedback or further discussion on the topic.
I think the only reason why we were keeping it loose is because if that, there's slightly different types of variation of slats or posts. And so if it wasn't going to match the side the Chick-fil-A is on exactly, we wanted to keep that open, but we're more than happy to commit to a 6-foot tan vinyl fence. And unless there's another recommendation out there, but we see that as a high quality addition. And it might give some clarity to the neighbors if they want to start moving forward on replacing some side yards, as Jeff mentioned. They can start making plans there as well.
So how many of the neighbors have you spoken to?
We've only spoken to the neighbors who have reached out to us specifically about the fence. So we have not knocked every door and asked them what their fence preference is. The truth is, those who do have an existing fence up, we could put fences next to each other, and they could stick with their existing fence. But our plan was to unify the perimeter on our portion of the property.
Commissioner Wright, we haven't spoke with every neighbor. I've probably spoken to 4 or 5 neighbors, but I have spoken to some of the neighbors that are more of a leader in the neighborhood, and they've been communicating with the other neighbors that we'll be installing a fence the entire property line, and we'd like to coordinate with each neighbor and make sure that they're okay with our plan.
Would you be willing to consider maybe like a graduated fence where it's closer to the like the residential? Maybe it's more 6, and maybe as it goes up to the west, it could climb up to provide more security or more safety, as it's not as much the residential to residential. I don't know.
You could do that.
When we've talked about fencing changes, we've had issues basically between like types of uses. And if it's residential to residential, that type is not as problematic as if it's a different type, you know?
I think the best thing to do is maybe as a condition of approval, you guys, commissioners discuss on the commercial property, if we have an agreement with all of the adjacent neighbors to install an 8-foot fence, that we would install an 8-foot fence. But I would almost defer to those neighbors if they would prefer, as a collective group, the 3 or 4 neighbors that border the commercial lot would prefer a 6-foot fence. We'll do that. If we need to bump it up to 8 feet because those neighbors would prefer additional privacy.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that is it should be a collective with staff approval as well, because from my experience on a frontage road, there's also some site triangle issues. And having an 8-foot fence as you come around the bend, especially when people are pulling out, may or may not be good. But I would just want to make sure that we get recommendation from staff on what their normal requirement is. As it pertains to a site triangle.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I just know that was an issue I remember that being an issue for a lot of residents. And so I'm welcome to have some flexibility. I mean, I don't know if I know the exact right answer to this fencing situation, but I would just hesitate to approve something that hasn't really taken into consideration how that specifically how, you know, different uses might be affecting an existing residential security, like light pollution, everything, you know. So I think that there needs to be maybe, and that's something we can talk as a commission. So thank you for answering the question.
Great. Thanks, Darlene and Jeff. All right, so that's a good discussion there on the fence. What's interesting about that is, it looks like for a significant part of the way on the west side of the fence, there's grapes or some of it might be Virginia creeper, but maybe somebody's trying to grow grapes there. So anyway, I'm inclined to leave that more toward a coordinating effort with the property owners there to figure out how they want to handle that. Because, you know, some people, even if it is backing up in commercial property, they might not want an 8-foot fence in their backyard. That's kind of jarring in a lot of ways. So if we need to do any type of conditional approval, I would support having that be just to coordinate it with the neighbors.
Yeah, I really like their suggestion of coordinating with the neighbors and upon approval of any, you know, visibility issues from the city too. I think that, you know, the applicant has been pretty great in
Sight lines is probably the word.
Huh?
Sight lines.
Sight lines.
The word you'll probably want to use.
And I just think that we've seen them be, you know, fairly good at responding to concerns. And I think knowing that this is a concern that we've heard, let's put it in there and give them the option to work with neighbors and city officials.
Geez, I thought I clicked the button, then I didn't. So I guess the last thing that we, well, not the last thing, but, you know, the other thing to just make sure we talk about as a group is, you know, the concern that Corey raised about changes to the plan. You know, we originally saw that more traditional craftsman style home, and then the 3 renderings in the development are definitely more modern. You know, I feel like, to me, it's not really very material, the changes, because they are still leaving in the stuff that was addressed as concerns before, which was second floor balconies looking back into people's yards. Those aren't going to be part of it anymore. So that was the main material stuff. And a variety of architecture and colors doesn't seem to bother me too much. So I'd be interested to hear what the rest of you have to think about it, though. Spencer?
Yeah, you've heard me already a little bit. I'd approve it regardless. But if you look at the 3D renderings of each of the options, they actually kind of slope away in a good way from the neighbors to the north, whereas the previous architecture was more boxy in nature, went 2 stories straight up. And if you look at the back the portion of the 3D renderings, they kind of slope away from those residents. So if anything, if I'm a resident there, I'd probably be happy that there would be less, less structure so close to the property line. So the one Corey's showing right there, if you look at it, yeah, see how it slopes away there. So I think it's actually kind of a win for those neighbors. I think option number 2, I can't quite tell because there's not a rear rendering. You can kind of see it a little bit back there. Yep, that Corey's pointing out, maybe where that covered porch is at. But again, I think that's probably an improvement for those neighbors to the north.
Mason.
And I'll go next. I don't like it when there are audibles that are changed without us kind of being forewarned about it. But I think we as a planning commission can be flexible if there are improvements to go ahead and approve under the code as written. So I'm in favor of these particular changes. So there, yeah.
Thanks. That's good. Christina.
I would approve them. They're not my style, but I like how it's more conformed with the office building and the townhomes. But I'd approve them.
Great. Is there anything anybody else wants to talk about with any of the 3 motions, Becky?
I just want to make sure that if with the conditional use, we could do a conditional use that addresses the things that we brought up that are not quite as clear, and that Corey mentioned that maybe we don't have as many answers on. So that would be just
so not exactly a conditional use, but a condition for approval.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Sorry. Yep.
Okay. No, that's okay. Well, I guess what specifically do you want to bring up, and let's make sure that we put it in the right place, because we've got a motion to approve the final site plan for the commercial, a separate motion to approve the final site plan for the residential, and then a motion to approve the subdivision, the PUD subdivision. So
Corey, can you guide us on where conditions might fit best?
As I'm recalling in the report, the likelies, probablys, feasibility statements are associated with the commercial. So I would probably pass a condition, something to the effect that stating that any of the shortcomings identified in the staff report related to this project be addressed and submitted to the zoning administrator prior to issuance of construction permits. Something
And Corey, specifically, what were those shortcomings? We've got the landscape.
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Utility screening, and anything else?
So I'll go back up to, where's the commercial lot? So we have interior parking lot landscaping was a shortcoming. Assurance of utility screening, both ground mounted and roof mounted in the commercial. The trees that I missed in the report along the private lane on the commercial lot, the north lane. And they've addressed, which I did not see in the plans, the matching of the materials for the dumpster.
So the trees are not specifically addressed in the staff report though, right, Corey? So we need to call those out separately.
Yes. Yep.
Right.
And I think the trash enclosures, they had the detail on, what was it, page 30, I think Jeff said page 34
Yes.
4 or something, 37. There it is,
Sorry,
31, sorry. 31 is the detail, but I don't know that it gives us, it just says corrugated metal panel painted to match building trim. So I think the trash enclosure issue is taken care of on that page 31 of the PDF file.
The other element to address on the residential is simply the call that you're going to make on the architecture. And then the other one would be is back to the ground mounted and utility, particularly associated with the townhomes.
Corey, is that both on the commercial and the residential, the utility screening, ground and roof mounted, or is it just residential?
It'll end up being for both because
Okay.
the townhomes are required to do it also.
So we just need to add that as a condition of approval for both.
Yes. And then the
So,
last
Corey,
item that I remember is associated with the subdivision. I'm looking quick to see if I covered it. We have the articles of incorporation. Yes, I've already included that in a condition. So those are the elements I can see from the report, with the addition of the trees on the north lane.
Right, but let's talk about that in just a minute. But on motion number 2, the residential item 4, condition number 4. So obviously that's the one that you've highlighted in yellow and said that we need to determine compliance. So the building elevation plan for the residential uses shall comply with. This is for us to put in there, the renderings as provided by the applicant, or what are you looking for there?
Well, for me to just be thorough, I would say as approved by the PDO or the exhibits shown with the site plan, final site plan submittal presented to the commission.
Okay. And then then back to the trees and the screening. So sorry, I'm trying to write down a whole bunch of things here and I'm getting lost.
There's a lot to do on this one, Kevin. You're doing a great job. I'm still writing. I'm trying to keep track.
Kevin, if I remember right, so motion number 1 is our commercial. We
Yep.
need a condition of approval for the interior parking lot landscaping, including trees.
Yep.
It's another condition of approval would be the private lane trees.
Yep.
And a
On the
third
north
one
lane.
would be the utility screening, both ground and roof mounted.
And then if you agree as a commission, you would add in the condition talking about the bumping up of the fence height in the commercial lot. If a consensus could be made with the property owners, a minimum 6 foot, allow up to 8 foot because it's a discretionary if they can receive consensus and include the site triangle matter.
Well, so is that another one where we need to maybe put one in each, the residential and the commercial, because that fence is going to run the full length there. And so the idea, I think intent, and we can obviously vote on this in a minute, but our intent is for the developer to work with the property owners to the north to determine the best.
I think that's your discretion. What I heard is once it transitions to the commercial lot is where the bump up to the 8 foot would take place, but maybe I misheard that.
That was my understanding too, Kevin. It applied really from that use line and west.
Well, that's what my suggestion was. That doesn't necessarily have to be how we did. I was just saying, between different uses, to me, it would make sense to have maybe a higher fence. I don't know that I personally don't love a high fence between similar uses, as I've said in the past, but I don't also want to just say, because I don't like it, we're going to limit that to how maybe it makes more sense for all those property owners and the developer. and they all want an 8-foot fence. I don't know. But for me, that might not be what it would be. So I think we could even, like Corey said, we can put it in there as long as they're, you know, in conjunction with each other. They feel like they're all in agreement and according to proper site triangles and, you know, city approval.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think one of my concerns with this one though is we keep saying consensus, but I think it's really tricky here because what we don't want to have happen is a fence that goes 6'8", 6'8", 6'8", you know, the full length of it. And that would be a nightmare in my opinion. That'd be a disaster. But so anyway, so I don't know that we necessarily want to leave it up to each individual person. And so maybe we just need to try and make that call as a planning commission and say, is 6 feet adequate for what we're doing here? And, you know, let the developer put it 6 feet. And if that doesn't work, then I don't know what else would happen. I don't want to leave it wide open to end up with a hodgepodge of a fence. So how do we do that?
So I'll jump in because I've been thinking the same things, Commissioner Day. I think you raise a really good point. I would prefer or suggest that we create a default, and upon consensus, they can then modify it to something else. But we don't want to allow there to either be a fly in the ointment or, you know, for one person to prevent everybody from doing the one thing that we might otherwise want to do. So I would say, let's make a decision, just like you're suggesting, and then but through consensus and upon approval from the staff, they can modify it to the other option.
A consensus of a majority of the residents,
No, I'm suggesting, yeah, it's a good question. I'm suggesting that if all the residents want to go to a different option and the developer agrees and staff approves, they can do so.
Okay.
And then it just creates a path forward for it's either 6 or 8, and then they can pivot if they want.
Can I just present an alternate view on that? I love consistency. I love, you know, nice, smooth lines. I would be surprised if all of the fences are the exact same height right now. And I also would be surprised if all of the fence matches right now. So I just think we need to be a little bit careful on being too heavy-handed on the kinds of things that people on their own property get to do. Now, I'm not saying I want a fence that goes like this. That is not what I am saying at all. What I am saying is I think it's okay to be fairly flexible and say, you know, if we don't want a fence that goes up and down, then we just say 6 feet on the residential, sloping up to, you know, potential of up to 8 feet for a usage change. To me, that's what makes the most sense. And that would be also based on consensus in that area, like we said, with the city approval as well. I just think we're getting a little bit like, we will say exactly this much, and it might be too much to me.
For references, for the commission's sake, what is the height of the existing fence? I think we've had this answer before, but I just want to make sure we're clear on it. What's the existing fence height on the southerly property line? Isn't that 6 feet between Chick-fil-A and the existing site?
It's
8.
It actually is 8 feet.
8 feet. So you have maybe a precedent of an 8-foot fence between commercial and residential uses there. And so maybe we have some good guidance already in place such that we could say from the easterly McHenry property line to as far as the frontage road, the fence height shall be 8 feet, subject to city staff safety review of visual sight lines. That would be one idea.
So one of the things that I was going to mention real quick is that the existing fence there on that very western edge, the northwestern corner, it says basically maybe a 6-foot chain link fence. It's probably only actually 5 feet tall. So, it does have, looks like grapevines on it, or some kind of vine on it, but it's really only about 6 feet tall, and it's not that much more. So I am concerned that even though it is a difference of use, to go to 8 feet would be a huge difference, where really it's, you got chain link looking out onto the frontage road.
Yeah, and I also hate the thought of imposing our will or our, proposed notion of what's acceptable on a property owner. If they want to keep the 5-foot chain link fence there, I guess that's their prerogative. And if the developer, if CW Urban doesn't like the sight of a chain link fence fronting their property as people come in and out of their development, they're more than entitled to put up a 6-foot vinyl fence there. So I guess I'm kind of torn on that.
Yeah, I'm inclined to try and stick with some sort of 6-foot tan vinyl fence, unless a consensus can be reached between the developer, adjacent property owners, and staff. Partly so,
I like that.
I think we need to make a decision as a planning commission, and then sure, we can give an out, but let's not try and work in all the outs into this particular approval.
I like that.
Okay.
Could I just, I know I'm interrupting, Chair, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. The way the ordinance reads, yeah, the way the ordinance reads is it's a mandatory 6 fence. There's no discretionary on that. When you go back to the ordinance, to go from 6 feet to 10 feet in this residential high zone or the commercial, it is at the discretion of the developer requesting the city. Then the city, being the planning commission, can decide if it's worthwhile to go higher. They have to actually make an argument to go higher under the ordinance. And then at your discretion, you can agree or disagree with that argument. And so what I would approach it this way is that we establish the minimum of 6 feet, and then let the developer and the owners decide along that commercial lot if they want to go to 8 feet. If they do, they can come back in and get the 2-foot increase from the commission. And from what I hear, probably get a majority vote.
So essentially in that case, we do nothing today, let the ordinance do its thing, and then if there's a problem with it, they can come back.
Yep.
But do we not want to direct anything in this that would lead them to talk with, neighboring residential that's on different use?
Well, this is why I stepped in a little bit. I don't disagree with the negotiation effort, and the developer is more than willing to negotiate. What I see is that, there may be a disparity of owners. And so what I'm really relying on is let's go with the plain language of the code and let that rule. But we have sent the message that we would prove up to 8 feet if they can get all the property owners along the commercial lot to agree. And I just think the plain language of the code keeps us in the narrow box of what the city can require.
I like that, Corey. My only question to that is if we include that, basically what you're saying, approving up to 8 feet, which is something that the applicant themselves suggested in this conversation. And you've kind of helped us figure that out too. If we do that now, if we include that now, would that prevent them from having to come back to us? Would that save a step and let it just kind of move forward working with staff? Because we've already gone through this whole conversation. Why bring the applicant back here, have this whole conversation again, and then do it if you've already, to me, I feel like putting it in right now, you've helped us with that. They can work with you.
Yeah, I think the spirit of what you're doing is right on. The issue is the practical application, that if if you say, okay, it's 6 foot, you can go up to a consensus of 8 foot. The commission says yes, and we start having problems with one owner wanting 6 foot, another one wanting 8 foot. And now it becomes a triangulated argument of who, but I really want an 8 foot, but I only want a 6 foot. And the developer's sitting there going, okay, I'll do both. And then we're doing this. So I just like the cleaner place of 6 foot. We know that's a minimum. You can come back for an 8 foot if you somehow everybody really wants to do it. But that's my view of having to take the phone calls.
I'll chime in, and I really like that proposition. That's the one I would lean towards.
And I agree with that too. I like Corey's guidance, getting us back on track and let the ordinance do its work. And if there's some consensus, they can come back and chat with us.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else that we need to talk about? Any outstanding unresolved items? I've been frantically writing some potential conditions here. So anything else I need to add to my conditions? Okay. Then in that case,
Can we at the very minimum at least call out the ordinance of the fence? How about that? Would that make sense? Is everyone okay with that? Can we at least put that in our findings or something? Because I don't want, okay, great, thank you.
We can, but it's duplicative, correct? I mean, if it's the ordinance, it's the ordinance.
yeah, we could put that in as a suggested reason for action, right? Or finding.
That would be great. That would make me feel comfortable after all of this effort and work that we've gone to with the applicant, with staff, and hearing from residents as well. So.
Okay. All right. So let's do this then. For the first motion, which is for the commercial part of it. Just trying to make sure I got everything straight. Okay, so let's do this. I will make a motion, and I'm open for input when we get to that appropriate point. But so I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan for the commercial office site for the Hive development, also to be known as Lot 201, when the PUD plot is recorded as follows, with items 1 through 6 in the staff report, and then an additional item number 7, condition number 7, which reads, outstanding questions relating to interior landscaping, private lane trees, and utility screening shall be addressed with and approved by the zoning administrator, with suggested reasons for action 1, 2, 3. And then Becky, a 4th reason for action, that the Planning Commission finds that the existing ordinance relating to fencing is adequate to address the any potential concerns. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay, great.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion on this motion for the commercial office site? No, okay. Then we will start left to right on my screen, which I may have moved people around, so it's going to be different than you, but we'll start with Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
Commissioner Summerhays.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. Okay, motion number 2. I hereby make a motion for the planning commission to approve the final site plan for the residential site for the Hive development as follows, 1, 2, and 3 as outlined in the staff report. And item number 4 shall read, the building elevation plan for the residential uses shall comply with conceptual renderings 1, 2, and 3 as provided by the applicant. 5 and 6 in the staff report. And then, do we still have the questions left on the residential side? We
still have the
do.
trees applied to residential as well, if I remember
Yeah, so
correctly.
let's
And
use the same.
utility.
Yeah, so let's use the same condition there then. So number 7 would be outstanding questions relating to any interior landscaping, trees, and utility screening shall be addressed with and approved by the zoning administrator with the same 4 reasons for action that we did on the last one. Do I have a second?
Second. I'll second.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so on this motion and second, do we have any further discussion on this one? Great. Then let's go with Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox,
Aye.
Commissioner Summerhays,
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Okay, the final one, let's see, your motion number 3 for this is just for the PUD subdivision. We don't have to really add anything to this one, do we, unless I'm missing anything?
I didn't write anything down for this one. I think they had everything.
Yeah,
I didn't think.
okay. I'll just take care of it like we've been doing then. I hereby motion for the planning commission to recommend approval of the final PUD subdivision plans and plat for the Hive development to the city council as follows, with conditions 1 through 6 as outlined in the staff report, and suggested reasons for action 1, 2, and 3.
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. All right, any further discussion on this one? Great. Start with Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
Commissioner Summerhays.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilcox.
Aye.
And Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. So thank you, everyone. It was a very good discussion. I feel like we covered a lot of ground and yeah, did a good job of doing it. So thank you all. Let us move along now to the next item on the agenda, which is land use training, municipal land use. And let's invite Commissioner Shagrud back to join us. Thank you. I'm glad you popped up there. My goodness. Land use training. Let's turn the time over to Lisa and see what she has to say.
Great, thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen. And okay, are you seeing that? All right, great. Well, thank you. We have episode number 2 in our land use training, and today we're going to talk about noticing. And I don't know if the reading was interesting or tedious for you, but there's a lot of noticing requirements. And I think it is helpful for the Planning Commission to understand everything that goes on in trying to notice, trying to comply with the state noticing requirements. So, and they change every year. So they always like to add things for us to comply with. But and so today, also wanted to talk about, share some pictures from my trip to Tasmania, which is on the southern tip. It's an island off the southern tip of Australia, and it does take about 2 days to get there. Anyway, I did a 7-day trip there, about a, I don't know, 40 or 50 mile hike. Only this one, instead of having to stay in tents, you stay in really nice cabins with hot showers. So don't feel sorry for me. Anyway, and it was the Cradle Mountain area of Tasmania. And so one of the founders trying to protect a lot of Tasmania, this Gustav Weindorf, he built a cabin there And he said, welcome to Waldheim, where there's no time and nothing matters. And it really is true. I mean, Tasmania is just, it's magical. So anyway, and beautiful, just so. So anyway, noticing, it's very complicated. And so a few years ago, we created this chart, and I know the Planning Commission has seen this chart before, but we kind of keep adding to it as new state statutes come along, and maybe we can refer back to this, but you know, we have our types of applications over here, and then along the top, these are all the different kinds of noticing that we have to give, and what noticing you give for what kind of application. And this is just for Planning Commission. And then it gets a lot easier, you know, when we were looking at amending our code, when we go to the city council level. We've said the first, because the statute only requires public hearings on certain first public hearings, and most of those are at the Planning Commission level. So we significantly reduced our required notice at the city council level, although they still do have public hearings on these types of items. So anyway, oh, wait, I have to start my timer so I don't go overboard. Okay, I'll take off 2 minutes. Okay. So I think we have 6 pages. First page is applicant notice. And so just so you know, and the public knows, any applicant of a land use application, we have to send them notice of every public hearing and every meeting that we deal with their application. There's no time frame for this, but we usually do the 3-day notice because the other thing that we have to provide the applicants is a copy of the staff report. So if they're going to be on our agenda, we have to give them a staff report. And so at the same time as when we notice them, we send them the agenda. We say you're on the agenda and here's the staff report. And then once you make you take final action like tonight, the land use body is required to send the applicant notice of final action of here's what we did. We approved it and these were the conditions. And I kind of like that one, you know, just following up and saying, yes, it was approved. Here's the letter. So Corey and Mackenzie take care of those letters for you. So thanks to them, they will go back to the drawing board and add a couple of the changes that you added tonight, and then get that letter out to the applicant. And they also send a copy to staff, you know, like I have it, so I can keep it in a file and just easily refer to it. So I kind of like that one. My favorite, and maybe Corey's favorite noticing, is this notice of intent to prepare a general plan, either an enactment or an amendment. So basically this says, and I don't know how it started, but we have to notify certain agencies that we're thinking about amending our general plan. So we always say, okay, before we can even put a general plan amendment on the agenda, we have to send out this notice. It's 10 calendar day notice to say, hey, we're thinking about it. So if you want to be involved right from the very beginning, you know, here's the notice. But it's essentially to entities and regional planning entities. So, you know, I guess it makes sense to let them know we're thinking about it. But I just assume give them notice of our proposed amendments. But I think the intent is to give them some opportunity to provide input. Okay, so on the noticing, taking a little fun with noticing, this is more just noticing beautiful things in Tasmania. And one thing is that it rains. It rains all the time. Well, it rains 150 days out of the year. And so basically you're just wet all the time. And so the company actually that does these touring trips, they supply a rain jacket and a waterproof backpack. That's how much it rains. They don't want to rely on your own rain jacket and rain gear. And basically your shoes are just mud and wet the whole time. So, but it's beautiful. So you can see it's very, very green and lots of different plant life there. Okay, so the next page is noticing for general plan amendments or enactments, and noticing for what we now call land use regulations, which is either an amendment to the zoning code or a zone map amendment. And these on our chart, these are basically the same kind of noticing. We have to provide notice, newspaper notice, published newspaper notice of any of these types of land use decisions. And we provide that newspaper notice of the first public hearing. Now, I'm excited to say, and I think Mackenzie will be excited, but there is a bill right now to do away with published newspaper notice. So I've already sent my email to the senator that's proposing this, Senator Maine, saying I think this is a great idea. And then I added a couple different sections that she missed out on, like we have to send newspaper notice whenever we change government salaries. And so anyway, but it can cost about $189 just to publish notice of, for instance, our salary schedule amendment. And I think there's a much better way to provide notice to people, which is on our website, on the Utah Public Notice website, and all of these other electronic means. I really don't think people rely on the newspaper for notice. And now that the newspapers are only published once a week, it's basically going to be all notices. So anyway, these are the most burdensome noticing, obviously, but they are significant legislative decisions. So it makes sense that we have that. And then this is on the next slide, but for zoning map amendments or rezones, we also now, as of a few years ago, have to provide courtesy notice to any property owners within that rezone. So if the city decides once again to do a citywide or neighborhood-wide rezone, we have to direct mail to every owner of property in the city that we're thinking about rezoning your property and give them information in the statute.
Lisa, just quickly, how often have we done rezone, like large rezones in the past? So every 5 years, 10 years, 15, every 2 years? What, generally, is there an average?
I think I've been working for the city 22 years and we've probably done it twice. I know we did it when we had to change all of our, when we redid our zoning code in 2003, we changed all the names. It used to be R1 and R2, and then we changed the names, which means we had to completely redo the map. So it wasn't that we were, really changing, and then I think we did it one other time, but that's about all I can remember. So not very often. So that one's not that burdensome. And usually these days we get smaller rezones and the applicant is the only property owner. So we don't do a lot of rezoning of other people's property. Centerville doesn't do much of that. And yeah, feel free to ask questions. I love those. Okay, so this is an example of the mud. And one thing that I like about Tasmania, actually 42% of the island is preserved in national parks or other World Heritage sites, 42% of the island. And so they take their land seriously, and also their hiking. So, in the United States or other places, you hike and, it's really muddy in the middle of the path, and we all just kind of take the easier, less muddy. But in Tasmania, when you're on, you have to go with a licensed guide, and you are required to walk down the middle of the path, regardless of how muddy it is. And the terrifying thing is that some of these are bog holes and you never know how deep they are. And seriously, like this guy, well, no, that's the guide, but one of the guys in front, he went up above his knee. He fell into a bog hole. And so you're basically walking with your hiking pole, or what I learned to do was just like walk in the back and then kind of watch where people go so you don't fall in a bog hole. And luckily I never went much above my calf, but anyway, I've learned a life lesson though. Like I don't mind puddles anymore. I walk right through the puddle. I mean, it's just water, mud. So anyway, but you can see if you don't walk in the path, you significantly erode this and it just gets wider and wider and wider. And so anyway, I kind of like that idea, and it never really occurred to me until I went to Tasmania. Okay, so this is the courtesy notice that I talked about. And, this one I do think is kind of burdensome, only in the sense of what we have to give them, because you have to show them the map and state, make some specifics. But again, I can't even remember the last time we had to send somebody that, wasn't an applicant notice of a rezone. Okay, let's see, this high priority corridor. I think this is a 2020. Let me see when this one was adopted. Yeah, this is a 2020 amendment that we have to provide notice if one of these transportation entities wants notice of development in a high priority transportation corridor. So I looked up the definition, and you'll see it's a little circular. High priority corridor is whatever corridor the department or the Transportation Commission has designated. So I went to their website, and it was kind of hard to find, but I don't think there are any high priority corridors in Centerville. There was one in Farmington for the West Davis corridor. So anyway, but it's basically that if they tell us to notify them, then we have to notify UDOT and, also probably some other transportation entities like UTA. So I don't know, we might put something in our code just to remind us, or else I can do more research and see if any of these are close by. Okay, noticing the silence. About 3 or 4 days into the trip, once you've really settled into your vacation and you're not thinking about your phone or anything like that, because your phone doesn't work out here, they actually let each one of us, this is the oldest growth rainforest in Tasmania, and these are the billy pines, and they're over 2,000 years old, and it's just amazing. And as a rainforest, so they just have the lichen all over the trees and everything, and lots of ferns on the ground. But anyway, they sent us through individually 10 minutes at a time. So one hiker went all by themselves, and then I think I was somewhere in the middle, which it was really beautiful and peaceful, but I do have a vivid imagination. So I got kind of scared out there by myself, but because there's lots of noises. I mean, the forest makes so many sounds, just the creaking trees and, anyway. And then there's these awful like water moccasin kind of snakes. And I was pretty sure there was a huge snake, but anyway, it was beautiful. That was one of my favorite times, was just being alone in the rainforest. Okay, this is just a follow up. A large public transit district can also ask for certain noticing, but again, I don't think it applies to us. Then this is the notice that we have to give if we want to amend a subdivision and to vacate a public street. Yeah, we've done that a few times. It's vacating a public street takes a lot of work, but we've done it a couple times actually. And then this is the vacating a municipal utility easement. I'd love to talk to Mason. They fixed this and they made it a municipal utility easement, but now they've left out completely how you vacate a public utility easement, which is a different definition. But anyway, we still follow the same procedures here for vacating a public utility easement. Okay, and then noticing the green, like I said, I mean, it rains so much and they have rainforests and lichen. And I wanted to say that they told us, the trees were over 2,000 years old, but they were also saying that some of these, not just the lichen, but I don't know, there's these, pincushion kind of plants, and they were saying they're over 200 years old, which is another reason they want you to stay on the path. Oh, gosh, sorry. Anyway, is because even plants like this can be 200 years old. So it was just fascinating. Okay, notice of student housing, they have to notify us. Canal owners, this is kind of a new one. They need to tell us who they are so we can help incorporate them into our planning. This is also a new one. Anytime we change our subdivision standards, these are, like how much asphalt you have to have. And, we have, if somebody has requested us to notify them, then we have to notify them. I don't know who's keeping track of who's notified us for notice, but hopefully if we forget to give it to them, they'll let us know. Which I do like this up here, is that there is some, at some point we have to rely, because this is developers want to develop. And so there is a provision that says, look, if you haven't appealed the noticing within 30 days under section 801, then it's considered adequate. And that way the developers can rely after 30 days and spend a lot of money, starting to develop their project. So that's a good one. Okay, we're almost done. Noticing the new, they just have so many different animals over there, like the koala bear. I mean, they don't have the koala bear in Tasmania, but anyway, this is a wallaby. And they also have wombats, which are just like little, I don't know, squatty things. Some people in the group saw the wombats, but they were all Australian and I didn't know what I was looking for. And so I missed the wombat. I never saw a wombat, but this guy was cute and she's got her little Joey in the pouch there. And I guess wallabies are just small kangaroos, kind of the same thing, but they're not really that afraid of humans. They just they just kind of let you look at them and then they hop off. It's really funny. Okay, last page. This one's also new, 2019. And I have to say, I wasn't really that aware of this one either. But it's talking about if we modify our sign regulations regarding an illuminated sign. And then you have to go to all these different kinds of definitions, like a unified commercial development or a planned development. Anyway, we have to give notice if we want to change our illuminated sign regulations. And this may apply to us because some of these corridors are, unified commercial development and within certain transportation corridors, which certainly Centerville has with.
I can think of one blinding illuminated sign on Main Street that I would love to have changed.
All right, well, all we have to do is remember that we're supposed to give notice, but I'm not sure that's in a unified commercial development or a planned unit development. So, but anyway, yeah, I don't.
My question, Lisa, is what does it have to be scrolling? Does it have to be what constitutes illuminated sign? I'm thinking of the same thing, Spencer.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting. But it does, I think the more definitive is this unified commercial development, which means it's a pretty large development, large commercial development, and, or planned development. So if we want to regulate those.
It doesn't apply to single one-off dentists or orthodontists, Becky, is the answer.
I don't think so. No, but we're going to have to keep this one in mind as well. So, anyway, and then noticing the end, it's always sad, when you're done with these trips and these training sessions, but sometimes that's good. So that's number 2. So.
Great. It is always sad when we end your training, Lisa. Thank you very much. That was really good. And I'm actually really excited to hear about a bill to change the noticing amendments, and I have to send off some emails to encourage support. So
yes, I haven't actually read through the whole thing, but I was notified of it this week, and it would be exciting, but it's hard because the newspaper lobby is pretty powerful, and their argument is, hey, we'd go out of business if we didn't have this notice. But I think when the newspapers are no longer publishing weekly, this is then I was saying just to Mackenzie and our city recorder, I said, this is the perfect time to make amendments. And anyway, somebody else was thinking the same thing. So I really hope they pass.
Yeah. Well, it looks to be, pretty lengthy because it's amending a ton of sections, which, I was just looking at it while you were talking about it, and it's long. So to read through it all, I don't know how many pages that is, but it's 6,000 lines, the bill is.
Wow.
and it has moved from the Senate to the House. It's in the House Government Operations Committee. Hasn't been scheduled yet, but hopefully soon.
Well, great. Well, thanks for letting me go over a little. I think I did that last time too, so I'm gonna have to get. I thought this one was shorter though. So anyway.
You're doing fine, Lisa. And I do appreciate the table. I think that's very helpful. The matrix that you did that you put together, it's all very helpful to visualize that stuff. So.
Oh, one more plug. Yeah, with that table, you know, sometimes when we hear citizens just saying, oh, can you just send more notice, or can you do this or something? And I mean, you may see staff roll their eyes because we give so much notice, and it's hard. Like, you have to have these charts, these matrices to even to make sure that you're providing all of this. And we do go above and beyond in Centerville. Like, for instance, on our rezones, we go, someone in community development takes a sign around and actually posts the property. And those kinds of noticing, I think, are also effective. Like, we get a lot of calls from people saying, oh yeah, I saw the sign. So that would be my preferred way, is finding more effective noticing rather than direct mailing, other things like that. So,
Lisa, I specifically like that chart, like Kevin was saying, and I guess some feedback that I would have is encouragement. If we as a planning commission ask you to do something, for you to help us understand the level of intricacy that might take, maybe just not even just today, but like in the moment when we're asking you to do something, if you can maybe have that handy sometimes, or be able to just give us some feedback so that we're aware of what we're asking you to do.
Yeah. And the other thing that I was talking with Corey and Mackenzie after going through this and saying, we may want to recommend a few changes, because with our city council noticing, we still say 10 days and we don't have to. But by saying 10-day notice for planning commission and 10-day notice for city council, the developer has to wait 3 weeks, because there's no way to go from a Wednesday to a Tuesday and get that notice. And so anyway, we were talking about maybe reducing some of those, because it is a hard turnaround time. But anyway, we're kind of excited about that, to maybe be able to, not make people wait for these simple things, make them wait 3 weeks because we have a 10-day notice that we don't need. So anyway, yeah.
So you can talk to city council about that, about amending that, right?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do, and I don't know if I'll be able to keep up, but I attached to this agenda item as well some suggested changes based upon chapter 1. Like you said, Becky, you suggested we add a definition of geologic hazards, and then I wanted to change and update our conflict of law provision, because they had changed that in the state law. So anyway, I have some proposed changes to put in your packet next time based upon these noticing provisions. And so each week I'm going to try and it's just for discussion purposes, because you'll see if we actually wanted to do a zone text change, we'd have to give 10-day notice and newspaper and this. And anyway, I'm just putting it for discussion. And then maybe after we have a few chapters, or we're 6 months into it, then we'll just bring those back to you when it makes sense to spend the money on newspaper notice. Or maybe they'll amend the statute by then and we won't even have to do it. And then I could easily bring those. But anyway, so yeah, I'll propose, I've already drafted some proposed amendments to our noticing provisions based upon this chapter and the new statutes.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. That was good. All right, let's move on to the Community Development Director's report. Corey?
We have 3 tentative items that are applications that were not complete. And I think if Mackenzie told me right, none of them returned their information in time for your next meeting. Is that correct, Mackenzie?
That's correct.
So we do not have any items for you on your next meeting. we could work with the chair and see what's happening down the future, or you could make a decision now.
Do we have potentially parking to talk about?
We do, and I can be prepared for some additional parking.
And then I guess, Lisa, would you be ready for round 3? It's a really short turnaround, but
How many vacations have you been on recently, Liz? Given up?
Well, it would just mean we end early, because I did divide it into 12. And I only have, unless I go back to when I was a kid and we went to Panama for the whole summer. So then I can get up to 12 trips and we might do that. But yeah, no, I can try to get something ready. I think the next one is not that complicated. And then I could also bring forward the proposed text amendments. We can talk about that.
so yeah, I'd kind of like to hear from the commissioners about what you'd rather do. If you'd rather have the week off, or if you'd rather have spend some time talking about parking or anything else. So what do you think?
Personally, I may not be available on March 24th. Just FYI, there's a thing at the school that maybe Heidi might also not be available for, because we both have daughters in the same thing. So.
Okay.
I'm also happy not to do the training. I don't want you to cancel the meeting and not talk about parking just because you don't want training. I get that.
Right. So yeah, our next meeting is scheduled for the 10th. And so if we don't have a meeting on the 10th, then sounds like we'd be down 2 at least for the meeting on the 24th. So anybody else feel one way or another? Mason?
I'm fine I'm pretty much ambivalent. It would be great either way.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this then? Why don't we plan on meeting on the 10th, and let's talk about parking. And Lisa, if you want to talk about proposed changes or anything else that you want to talk about, we can, I think it'd be good. And maybe it'd be a short-ish meeting, but I think it would be good to kind of keep that parking thing moving along and eventually get it done. So Corey, does that sound okay?
Yep. We more than ready for that.
Okay. Anything else? Nothing, looks like nothing from the city council?
Nothing from the city council.
Okay. Sounds good. Let's move along then to coming down the home stretch. And let's talk about some minutes. We got 2 sets of meeting minutes to discuss. We've got, first of all, let's go with the meeting minutes from Wednesday, January 13th. Just to give everybody equal opportunity, especially here on Zoom. We'll go through these page by page like we tend to do. Anybody have any proposed changes or anything to talk about on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Perfect. Okay. Let's just keep on moving and we'll do both of them at the same time. The meeting minutes for Wednesday, January 27th. Anybody have anything to talk about on page 1? Page 2? That's it then. I will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to accept the unamended minutes from both January 13th and January 27th, 2021.
Great. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Second was Christina. All right. All those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
So are you
Perfect.
or
Spencer, you're not opposed to the minutes, right?
Correct. I said, I think I have an unstable internet. I said aye, and it might have said, ah, it might have gone really slow on me. I don't know.
Okay, great. Sounds good. That's good. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Nobody? You love this so much.
I'll move to adjourn.
Great. I'll second it. All those in
Second.
favor say aye.
Aye.